were circulated calling for action to be taken against board members. I have heard that there is a question as to why my name was not included in the call for action. I understand why there would be this question. I can't answer this, however. I became aware of the press release and petition after it was published, and likely even after many of you became aware. To be very clear, I had no knowledge of these actions being taken on any level. My understanding is that statements have been made over the last few weeks that I have relationships with individuals in our community. This is true. My children are active students in their school communities, and I have been an active volunteer in our district since elementary school and continuing today at St. Charles North. My daughters have good friends whose parents are passionately outspoken about their children's education and whose parents work in our district. I am disappointed that there would be any attempt to conjure a connection between myself and the independent actions of a group in our community. I consistently strive to maintain professionalism in my interactions and treatment of people. Yes, I have many valued relationships in our community, as does every board member seated at this table. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. All right, so that will take us to item 2, which is our public hearing. So I'm calling to order the public hearing for the Compass Academy Carnegie unit waiver. And Dr. Herman is here to give us an explanation.
Thank you. As in your packet, we gave information explaining that tonight's public hearing is to get approval from the board to apply for relief from the Carnegie unit. As you first learned back in November when we presented our plan for Compass Academy, it is based on competency-based learning. And as such, students will not be required to have a certain amount of time to meet their learning standards, but instead will do so through projects, other kinds of assessments. So we have been working with P20 Network at NIU, and they have connected us to the appropriate people at ISBE that is allowing us to have this application ready and, again, should be very well received by ISBE when they receive it.
Our microphone on, I apologize. That takes us to our citizens' comments. Mrs. Barker, will you please read our opening statement?
Yes. The school code provides for a public comment period at each board meeting, subject to reasonable constraints. The practice of this board is to limit public comment to 3 minutes per speaker to a total of 30 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. Speakers addressing the board are expected to maintain a reasonable level of civility. Also, personnel matters are sensitive and confidential. Comments regarding individuals should be respectful. Insults and defamatory remarks have no place in this setting. The board will terminate public comment if speakers cannot adhere to these guidelines. Please identify yourself at the beginning of your remarks.
Thank you, Mrs. Barker. Just kind of tag on to that, since it's been a while since we've been able to have people with us. Welcome, thanks for coming tonight. I know it's not good weather, but as Mrs. Barker said, just please be respectful of your peers, the board, and remember that the board does not answer anything at this time, but the point of even emails, and if people would like to add them, they're not here right now. I think we have some, but then someone can get back to you as well. So with that being said, our first speaker is Kimber McHugh.
My name is Kimber McHugh, and I am a member of the closed Facebook group Reopen D303 Schools. I have 2 children who attend East High School, a junior and a sophomore. I could stand up here and share with you the facts, statistics, and data that show why it's so important for our high school kids to be in school every day. But I don't think you care about that. which is ironic to me because when I was a teacher in this district, it seemed all you cared about was data and statistics. Instead, tonight, I'm going to talk to you about my youngest son. Before March 13th, 2020, my youngest used to love school. He looked forward to going. He couldn't wait to get in the car at the end of the day and tell me all about his day. My youngest is not the smartest kid in school, and he is not the most popular kid in school. So his love of school had nothing to do with getting into the best college or popularity. It had to do with pride and happiness. He simply enjoyed going, learning, seeing his friends, and talking to his teachers. He was 14 when this all started, and now he is about to turn 16. Let's let that sink in for a moment. He no longer loves school. He is no longer happy. He no longer cares about his grades. He no longer takes pride in his schoolwork. He cries every day to me. He begs me to homeschool him. He talks about how he is worried about his mental health. He is stressed out every day. He suffers from migraines due to a cavum, which is similar to a cyst on his brain. So all of these months of remote learning and in-person learning, I use quotations because he's in-person learning, but he still has to be on his Chromebook every day wearing headphones. So all of these months, you can imagine what that does to a kid who suffers from migraines. It means more medicine for him, which in turn upsets his stomach, which is already upset from the stress. He told me he can no longer do this. He cannot do remote learning because it is too hard for him to focus and it is too hard for him to understand the concepts being taught. He is struggling also with in-person learning because of the inconsistent school schedule, which changes every week. And he is also still, when he's in the classroom, having to be on his Chromebook, sitting at a desk where there is little to no interaction and no talking. As his mom, this literally breaks my heart. I wish you all could see the sadness in the eyes that used to be filled with joy. I wish you all could witness his breakdowns. I wish all of you knew what you're doing to my son. I know I'm not alone. I know there are so many other parents dealing with the same thing. My son tells me he actually feels better when his friends tell him how stressed and frustrated they are. It makes my heart sad that these kids feel better knowing they're all stressed too. I no longer have hope that these kids will get anything better this year than they are right now. But I'm not one to throw in the towel. So you can all sit there and continue to do nothing for our kids' mental well-being. But know this. I will keep speaking up. I will keep sharing what is happening in this school district. And trust me, when it comes to my kids, I don't ever back down. Thank you.
All right, that takes us to our next speaker, Karen Freeland.
Is this being recorded? Okay. So no one needs to really take any notes right now. I just really appreciate some full focus for what we have to say. My name's Karen Freeland and I have a junior at St. Charles North. As for your comments that you just made, I've never met you in my entire life. I'm one of the people that are interested in recalling some of the board members. I will say, from what I've heard and the emails that I've received when I've emailed the board, you have been kind in responding and seem to be very understanding on our point of view and having the kids back in school, whereas the other members don't seem to have those opinions at all. My question is about the citizens' comments. What is the point of us standing here saying our comments when there is no response by the board about anything we have to say? I spoke at the last meeting. I might as well have handed you my piece of paper at the end and you throw it all in the trash. I haven't received any emails. I didn't hear any comments anywhere. There was no opening comments today about the discussions that were last week about the kids getting back in school. And I'd like to introduce a possibility of an amendment where there is a response, even if it is the following meeting, 5 or 10 minutes, to at least know that we've been heard and there may be some action being taken. And the other thing I'd like to point out is we probably risked our lives more driving on the roads tonight to get here, but yet here we are, all in a school, in a classroom setting, and I feel like everyone here tonight feels like they came without risking their life to sit here this evening. So to say that it's unsafe to be in schools is ridiculous, because we're all sitting here in a school for this meeting this evening. I also like to know and get a response from where are you getting your data from? It's out there. The suicide rate's going up. It's all over the news. The CDC says the kids should be back at school. Dr. Fauci was on Brett Baer tonight at 6 p.m. just a couple of hours ago. Kids should be back in school. Wear a mask, social distance, do what you need to do to get them back in. The Department of Health says the kids should be back in school. The World Health Organization says the kids should be back in school. And I'd also like to know all the money that is required to open these schools, where did it go? In April of 2020, the CARE Act relief bill gave $30.75 billion to education for schools to have kids be back in person. The Illinois Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, which came out in July last year, had $108 million set aside for schools. Elementary and secondary schools, the relief was $569 million was given just to Illinois elementary and secondary schools. And then in December 2020, when the last bill was passed, the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, $82 billion was given to schools to open safely. And all I have to say is Kane County was given $9.2 million last month. Where is it and what are you spending it on? And that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Our next speaker is Rachel Cave.
Hi, I'm Rachel Cave. I have 3 kids in the district. Kind of going on what Karen just said about getting a response. So I know I'm going to talk about deep equity. I know that there's a meeting next week for the presentation for deep equity, but just to get ahead so that we can get some answers, because I know that once the presentation is presented to us, then we ask questions and we wait for answers. So to get ahead of that, I did write a letter to all of you and to Dr. Pearson and to Dr. Herman asking questions. These are the questions I asked. Why are we buying a program from a for-profit company when we are a public non-for-profit school? What does this curriculum look like? What impact will this have on the students? What part of the day will this program take place? Will this cut into the students' academic learning? And what are we currently doing in our schools to teach these concepts as to why it is necessary to buy and implement a whole new program? I did get a response from Dr. Herman, and she said it is not, I got a good response, but the important part, she said it is not a curriculum taught to all students. It's a training for teachers. And she did suggest to go back through the presentation that was in December, I believe, the PowerPoint. And in it, listed 3 times, it involves students. So in here, I highlighted on 3 different slides, it says it involves students. So I'm asking, and so are a few other parents, what does this involve? What does this look like physically in the day for our students? There's something called the Youth Equity Stewardship, the YES program, tied into this. And then in here we said, it says spring 2021. So now, recruit high school students for youth program. Fall 2021, youth program begins year 1. Youth program continues year 1. Recruit high school students for youth program. Fall 2022, youth program begins year 2. Spring 2022, youth program continues. So we're wondering, what is this? What does this actually look like? We're familiar with math and ELA and those kind of subjects. For me and for many other parents, this is brand new, this kind of training. And I read what might be coming down from the ISBE. Even if they vote no, from what I understand, our district still wants to get the deep equity program. And I think our focus would be better right now working on the COVID, getting our children the educational gaps from COVID, and maybe offering tutoring and things like that. So those are the big questions. I think the main one is, how does this affect our children? What does it actually look like, instead of just this slideshow? So next week, I know there's a presentation on it, and I know we're set to vote in March. I really hope these questions are answered for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is it Natalie? Yes, okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Natalie Stratton. I have 2 freshmen at North. I'm not as well prepared as some of the other speakers, but I'm feeling very passionate, and I just wanted to express that a lot of citizens have questions, and we're still in our social bubbles. We are still talking. People want to know what's going on with our children. I want to applaud all the in-person teachers. My kids are back in school. They're happy. They're engaged. They're performing well in their classes, and I want to applaud those teachers that are back in class. But let me tell you, when they're not in school, I've had to pay for private tutors that come to my house at $25 an hour, so they're not afraid to be in person. I've had to pay for therapy for my depressed daughter. Okay, all of these things would have been taken care of, or at least noticed, if they were in school. So again, I applaud the in-person teachers. But what's this causing, having some in-person teachers and some that aren't? It's causing animosity, because I've also had teachers talk to me, and they're wondering why some teachers are at home getting paid just like they are, their students are failing, and then there's those that are in person that are teaching, and they're working very, very hard. It's different programs than that they're used to, and they're doing a great job. But I want to know then, and the public wants to know, for these at-home teachers, what are the reasons? Why are they at home? Is it that they're scared? I think that's already been covered today. More and more results are showing that recovery rate for COVID is, 99.98%. I mean, obesity and eating your fast food and your poor public health practices are way more dangerous than what we're seeing from COVID right now. Life is full of risks, and it's about personal responsibility. And these teachers need to be back in school. And then, different subject, but you're talking about this deep equity program. Why is it assumed that parents aren't communicating and teaching our kids right from wrong? And that's a whole nother subject. But that gets me back to the point, these teachers need to be in school. We need to get back to normalcy. We need to then see if there is a problem in this community and discuss it then. But let's get these teachers back in school. Let's hold them accountable. And if there's some reason that they're not in class, this needs to be discussed and given to the public. Thank you for your time.
All right, our next speaker is Marina Schusterman.
Good evening. My name is Marina Schusterman. I have 3 children in District 303. I would like to address declining academics from pre-COVID and the district administration decision to hire deep equity organization. We've seen sharp decline in academics in our school district across all grade levels. The Learning and Teaching Department does not purchase curriculum resources that are best practices, but rather chooses ones that are experimental and collaborative. Resources, financial and physical, are not appropriately allocated to schools and students to address the academic declines because there is no accountability. Reduced instructional time and lack of in-person learning is the main reason why our academics sharply declined starting last spring. These decisions, supported by the board, have contributed to the academic decline. The board needs to hold Dr. Pearson and the administration responsible. During Learning and Teaching Committee meeting held on December 21st, Dr. Herman introduced a deep equity solution to our district issues. The administration wants to hire a for-profit company, Corvin, and new director of diversity. It will cost our district only $127,000 plus 6 figures administrative salary annually. We do support equality for all. While our schools are not immune to racial and social issues and bullying, they are not drivers of low academic performance in our district. What is a deep equity? Proclaims America is based on hierarchy of various oppressions. Man oppresses women, Christianity oppresses Islam, English oppresses Spanish, white people oppress everyone. Provides a roadmap to assist teachers in transforming whole white children into self-hating social justice warriors. Teach students of color that any problems they have in school are the results of the actions of their white oppressors. Orders teachers to explicitly reject and resist any parents who disagree with it. Teaches America is a deeply racist nation controlled by whites. Ignores education altogether. Advises teachers that racism is the reason their non-white students cannot read, write, and subtract. Asserts that a fundamentalist white identity is defined by denial, ignorance, and supremacy. Any whites dissenting this opinion are simply too dumb and so immersed in their privileged status they cannot realize their oppressors. By hiring this deep equity program, our board and the administration want to place personal blame for our low academics on the students, parents, and teachers, and not on their lack of ability to address the problem. Deep equity allows the administration to hide behind deep equity and not address the academic decline. We have, as taxpayers and citizens, the right to know and to approve what our students are taught. Is deep equity what we want for our children, for our community, for our nation, for our future? We, the community, say no to deep equity. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And then our last speaker here is Carrie.
Good evening. My name is Kerry Katashik. I have 3 kids at D303. And my purpose here tonight is to oppose the proposed Deep Equity Program. My comments are going to come directly from the President's Advisory 1776 Commission released January 2021. Subtitle, Teaching America. The primary duty of schools is to teach students the basic skills needed to function in society, such as reading, writing, and mathematics. In recent times, however, a new creed has arisen, challenging the original one, enshrined by the Declaration of Independence. This new creed, loosely defined as identity politics, has 3 key features and is the basis of the deeply racist, deeply anti-Semitic, Orwellian named Deep Equity. First, the creed of identity politics defines and divides Americans in terms of collective social identities. According to the new creed, our racial and sexual identities are more important than our common status as individuals equally endowed with fundamental rights. Second, the creed of identity politics ranks these different racial and social groups in terms of privilege and power, with disproportionate moral worth allotted to each. It divides Americans into 2 groups, oppressors and victims. The more a group is considered oppressed, the more its members have moral claim upon the rest of society. As for their supposed oppressors, they must atone and even be punished in perpetuity for their alleged sins and those of their ancestors. Third, identity politics denies the fundamental moral tenet of the Declaration, that human beings are equal by nature. This founding principle provides a permanent and immutable standard for remitting wrongs done to Americans on the basis of race, sex, or any group identity. According to the new creed, Americans are not people defined by their dedication. In summary, states and school districts should reject any curriculum that promotes one-sided partisan opinions, activist propaganda, factional ideologies that demean Americans' heritage, dishonor our heroes, or deny our principles. Anytime teachers or administrators promote political agendas in their classroom, they abuse their platform and dishonor every family who trusts them with their children's education and moral development. Thanks for your time.
All right, thank you. That concludes citizens' comments for tonight. That will take us to the superintendent report. Dr. Pearson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mannheim. I just have a couple of updates for the board this evening. The first one is that the high schools are actually conducting some student focus groups over the next few weeks. I mentioned that at our last meeting, and we would invite any board member that would like to sit in on a focus group to do so. If you could let Mrs. Ratchford know if you're interested in sitting in on a focus group, we'd be happy to include you. We just need to schedule, based on your availability. So if you can work with her, she'll be happy to find a time of a focus group that might be one that you could attend. I also wanted to mention that the high schools have put together a celebration and recognition committees for the spring semester. It's a joint committee between both high schools, East and North, with parents and student representatives. They're going to be looking at the spring recognitions and celebrations that we typically have to try to plan events that meet the requirements. I will also say that we are fully committed to a graduation ceremony for our seniors, and this team will help us look at some of the options that are available for that as well. So we appreciate the parents. There were close to 100 parents that volunteered to serve on the committee. They weren't able to accommodate all of those for the initial committee, but they certainly will be looking to include additional parents on maybe some subgroups or subcommittees going forward, in addition to the students that are included. I also wanted to mention that this week is the vaccination clinics for Kane County educators. As of today, they are approximately 4,500 vaccines being given just to the Mid-Valley districts, so Batavia, Geneva, St. Charles, Burlington Central, and Caneland. In our district, we've had approximately 1,500 of our staff members sign up to be vaccinated. So this is the first round. Kane County is administering the Moderna vaccine to the educators in the district. So as you know, that's a 2-dose vaccination. The first dose is now, and then the second dose is 28 days later. So we'll be doing this again in March. So far, it's been a very seamless process, and the health department's been very supportive in working with the school districts to make this available to staff that are interested. I also wanted to mention that the state will be sending out the 5 Essentials survey, which is typically a part of school report cards. It gives an opportunity to solicit some feedback from students, staff, and parents. So we'll have the window open a little longer this year than is typical. It will be open all the way, I think, until close to spring break. So that will be coming out to families hopefully this week. So thank you. That completes my report.
Can I, or Dr. Pearson, can I ask a follow-up related to the vaccination? So what does that look like for our educators and supporting staff? That 1,500, is that 90% of our team, or?
I'm looking to Mr. Moore. Part of the problem that we have is we're not sure who's already accessed the vaccination, either because they were in 1A, like we have our nurses and some of those folks. We also have others that maybe have been able to get it from a physician, depending on that. So as far as our total staff numbers, we can get that to you, what percentage it represents.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Pearson. That will take us to our committee reports, and we will lead off with L&T. Mr. McNally.
Okay, thank you. L&T met, on January 19th at 5:30. We started with superintendent update, as we always do. He spoke about the kindergarten registration and the deadline for submitting applications for the school board member vacancy. Both of those are past items, but he did make mention of those. Our discussion items were, first up was the iReady MTSS update. Administrators presented information related to an update on mid-year data from December 2020, iReady diagnostic assessments in reading and math for grades K through 8. District achievement goals were reviewed in areas of attainment and growth by subpopulation, content, and school. Mid-year targets were met for overall achievement and growth in reading and math. discrepancies were identified among subgroups in both reading and math. Some of the board member questions were the following. Progress of middle school math. Dr. Herman indicated the administration from middle schools will be invited to an upcoming meeting to present information and an update. How many students fell below the 50% median? Dr. Herman will supply the board with that information as well. And the other question that was asked was comparison of our students in subgroups compared to students in other districts in the same or similar subgroups. And in fact, that included particularly in schools that were primarily that subgroup. Also, the next up was the high school first semester failure report with remediation options. Dr. Herman, Mr. Richter, and Mrs. Christensen presented information on number of students receiving a failing grade for the first semester. Data was analyzed by previous year subgroups and courses. They shared plans for increased remediation and expanded credit recovery opportunities, including credit recovery during the school day, grade level restrictions that have been removed, night school, the Compass Academy, which we'll be talking about tonight, ninth hour at East High School and summer school with a fee waiver for students who attend summer school for credit recovery. Board members asked about the following. How are the schools staying on top of the situation? High schools indicated in their eligibility checks every Friday. In addition, SST teams are meeting every week and following up with teachers. Administration will provide board with a breakdown of the number of students that received an F, either in one class or multiple classes. Question came up, how are schools monitoring the seniors that are receiving an F? Administration indicated school counselors are working with seniors who are credit deficient. Because many classes are semester-based and foundational learning occurs before the students begin to receive grades, an update will be provided in March. In response to increasing students' time in the buildings, new extended learning sessions began. Extended learning sessions are open to all high school students. East High School specifically invited 240 students to participate, and only 5 students were in attendance. St. Charles North specifically invited 250 students, and only 7 were in attendance. And next up was item C, the board member vacancy, and Mr. Mannheim outlined process for board member vacancy. Most of these, these deadlines have passed for the most part, but application was January 29th, application deadline. The list of qualified applicants was sent to the board February 1st. Members of the board were to discuss applicants during the closed session, will discuss applicants during closed session today. Members of the board will review viable candidates at a special meeting of the board on February 22nd, and the new board member will be seated at the March 8th board meeting. Our next meeting is going to be on February 16th, and that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McNally. Ms. Berger, you have business services?
Our last Business Services Committee meeting was on Monday, January 25th. We started by reviewing a couple of our standing agenda items, the financial report for Mid-Valley, and also the financial report ending December 31st for the District 303. We did receive a COVID-19 update in terms of expenditures. 1.7 million has been spent to date. An agenda item on tonight's meeting relates to the timeline for the fiscal year 21-22 budget calendar, and in addition to that, affirmation or designation of the individual to prepare the budget is also on tonight's agenda. The committee reviewed possible tax levy abatement scenarios with consideration given to the actual CPI, which was determined earlier in the month of January. An outcome of that discussion was we would continue as is at this time in terms of our budgeting for the tax levy for this year. We also received additional follow-up update related to COVID-19 saliva testing that is being done in some other districts throughout the Chicago area. At this time, the committee determined that it was not something that we felt was really feasible due to the implementation and also the expense compared to the benefit. It is something that we talked about revisiting as the environment changes going forward. We received an update from a substitute teacher standpoint. Leadership felt that we are in a good spot related to our substitute teacher and capacity at this time. We reviewed a software update for the Dark Trace Antigena. That is on the consent agenda for tonight. And then we also reviewed the facility master plan update, and that will be addressed tonight again as well in this setting. And finally, we talked also related to Compass Academy, some things related to the infrastructure, furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Okay.
Thank you. We did not have policy, but Mrs. Barker is going to fill in for Mr. Bryant until the next board takes over, and then that'll change. But I believe the next meeting's in March, correct? Yes. Okay. And then CAC.
Mrs. Barker and I have decided, since CAC is working on the facilities plan, we would take turns in sitting in on those meetings. We both have had that opportunity in the last month, sitting in and hearing folks do the work that really requires some deep thinking and planning and thoughtfulness. And I think I can speak for both of us. We're very impressed with the work that they are doing. And again, they presented at L&T, and tonight I think Mr. Critter is going to present as well. So I don't have much else to report, but I do have DPTO. They meet every month, and again, the group has been meeting virtually, always looking for ways to support teachers. They've been doing some teacher appreciation ideas and have done an amazing job with how they reach out. They've been working on after-school events, enrichment, and how can they do it keeping kids safe and doing and including remote students as well. They also wanted to get more information about the board candidates, so they're working towards how they can do that. And again, a group of parents who are very caring and committed to reaching out to all of our kids.
Excellent, thank you. Was there housing?
Housing committee was canceled.
Okay. And then I had intergovernmental, which has kind of been the same thing as we've had, which is how each government entity is kind of working through the current restrictions and trying to provide services for all the community members. And I also filled in the committee, the group, on our board vacancy and our timeline on filling that. So, and that was it. All right, that concludes our committee reports for the evening. That'll take us to our 4 action items. Do I have a motion to approve the Compass Academy Carnegie unit waiver?
So moved.
Ms. McCabe?
Seconded.
And then Mrs. Barker. Are there any questions or comments pertaining to this? This is from the public hearing that we had earlier as well. Ms. Martin, will you take roll, please?
Mrs. Fairgrave?
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mrs. Barker?
Yes.
Mr. Mannheim?
Yes. Motion passes. All right. Do I have a motion to approve the revised intergovernmental agreement between certain taxing districts located in St. Charles Township, King County, in Illinois, or King County, Illinois?
So moved.
Ms. Fairgrave?
Second.
And Mr. McNally. As you saw in the board packet, this is ECC is asked to withdraw from the intergovernmental agreement for the PTAB. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none. Ms. Marcia?
Mrs. McCabe?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mrs. Barker?
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave?
Yes.
Mr. Mannheim?
Yes. Motion passes. That takes us to our consent agenda. Is there anything anyone would like pulled? Nope. All right. Any questions or comments pertaining to consent agenda? All right. Ms. Marcian?
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mrs. Barker?
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave?
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe?
Yes.
Mr. Mannheim?
Yes, motion passes. That takes us to our for information, which is our FOIA request, financial reports for D303 as well as McValley. The COVID-19 financial impact summary that Mrs. Fairgrave mentioned, district enrollment, and then the PTAB update. So that takes us to our new business. Is there any new business?
Mr. Mannheim, I'm wondering if there's an opportunity that we could plan for bias, equity, diversity conversation with the board members. IASB does provide training in that area that looks in my mind, looks exactly the kind of thing we should be talking about since we're the policy makers. So I would like to see if that's something we could do as a board retreat, probably after the board election, since we would have new board members.
Yes, and then I kind of mentioned to you, so ISAB has kind of a president's thing, I believe it was in December, before Christmas, and they had 3 presenters kind of talk about the 3 new programs that ISAB is offering for board training or retreats and stuff, and Lori Grant called and spoke with me after, and I said that it would be a great thing for the new board to look at when it's seated, probably in the spring or summer, so absolutely.
I was wondering if we could, in the near future, discuss some other possibilities or other ways that our citizens could come and give commentary, that if they could not make it in person, that even if we were in person, I was wondering if we could maybe explore some options for that.
I think we could talk about it in policy.
That sounds fantastic.
All right, anything else pertaining to new business? No? Okay. Then that takes us to item 9 for tonight, which is for discussion, and that is the facility master plan. And Mr. Critta is here, and I will hand it off to Dr. Pearson to kick it off.
So we were able to have a presentation at the Business Services Committee meeting, and so not to rehash all of those pieces again, Mr. Critta is going to talk through the timeline and kind of the process to update the board on where we are in the process. I know we do have some CAC members that are here tonight as well, and then of course we would be willing to answer questions or hear any feedback that you might have for them to consider as they move into the next phase.
Good evening, everybody. Good to be here again. We'll go through the process a little bit, and then you can ask questions at the end of it, but I'll just kind of recap of some of the things you heard at the Business Services Committee meeting. Just as a reminder, the charge statement that the board crafted and set that committee on task with, that committee has really embraced this. They've invested a significant amount of time and also thoughtfulness in the conversations they've had to really charge towards that outcome statement. So we're not there, but we're at a really important threshold in our process. So we always base planning processes on facts. It's fact-based planning is critical to this being successful, but also equally important is reaching that agreement on needs. And our committee has got to that threshold. That's the presentation that you saw at the Business Service Committee meeting. So those first sets of meetings and that fact findings all kind of culminated into need statements. Those need statements will drive our task going forward. What are the challenges that the district, from a facility standpoint, should focus on and solving? What opportunities should be leveraged as you move forward in the future? Those kind of questions are asked and create this framework of needs that'll set us into the next phase. The next phase of the process then is looking at solutions, is test fitting. How do we solve those needs? How do we interpret that and give it more tangibility so we can create some concrete solutions that the committee then can weigh in and say, this looks like it makes a lot of sense to address the needs statement. So from this point forward now, we had a little introduction meeting last week to kickstart those conversations. From this point forward, we will be focusing on solutions that will eventually become the framework for their recommendation for a long-term facility master plan. And with a target date of recommending that plan to the board on April 12th. So if there's questions, I'd be glad to answer those.
I have just a couple. Thank you so much, and it's nice to have that. At the business services, we talked about separating more with, those issues that might pertain mostly to students versus adults. Was that helpful to the committee? How, do you need more direction from us? What's your thinking?
I think the committee welcomed that input from being more student-centric in some of the statements where it applies. There was some examples given to them at our last meeting, and I think they're still thinking through that. So the next meeting we're having, we're going to set some time aside at the front of the meeting to let them wordsmith a little bit and make sure that they're comfortable with how that wording applies. The examples they had, I think we wanted to make sure that this was just testing from the board's input. How does this fit? They want to break into the focus groups and have a chance to kind of author those themselves. So that's what we're going to start the next meeting with.
Okay. I believe you're getting ready to look at what are priorities and what can be held back. And is that process working well? Do you need a little more direction from the board in terms of timelines, in terms of the priorities, or?
I think we took a first blush at that with the committee last week. I think there'll be more conversation happening that. So really what we want to do is we don't want them to prioritize from a high to low standpoint. We want to prioritize more from an urgency standpoint. So the board has some latitude to say, here's how this would stagger over a 10-year time frame or even longer. So we want to make sure that we get that input. And I think the first input that we received on that sense of urgency of some of the issues or the need statements that were presented, there was a little bit of disagreement. We want to revisit that with them as well. So I think we want to make sure that we've got kind of a consensus on the timing of these issues as much as we do on the need statements themselves. So that's yet to come. I think certainly the board can weigh in. As it gets closer to recommendation, the recommendation will usually have some time frame to it. And I think that at that point in time, the board would certainly want to say this fits in from a financial or from other resources that are available to really take a shot at how does this work for us in the long term.
Great.
And you may have things you want to push back to the committee too and say, let's revisit this issue, or can we relook at something that is a solution, and let that committee have another shot at kind of refining.
Right. When I attended the meeting, I asked the question about consensus, because the needs assessment, clearly there were some very strong, passionate feelings about access for students. Have you bumped into any problems where when not everyone agrees, working through it? And do you see that coming up as we go to solutions? I guess my concern is these people, this committee's worked really hard and have spent a lot of time. And I really hope that when they come to the board, I know this board will take it very seriously, the work that was put into it, and we will make decisions based on their recommendations. And to be really frank about it, if somebody says I disagreed with it and my voice wasn't heard, that doesn't help the board in making decisions. So I'm wondering about that process and how, if you see that there will be some, and how as you as the facilitator work to make sure that everybody's voice is heard when there are disagreements.
Right. Good question. So as we came to the full committee from the focus group settings to come to convene as one committee, there was a lot of agreement on the need statements, even if someone wasn't the author of those need statements, and other focus groups input. And we found that for the most part, as the need statements were expressed and there was added context by those focus group members, there was a lot of consensus reached. I think the place where we'll keep working through is layering what are the need statements we want to solve right away versus can this wait a little while? And if certainly funding is going to have an impact on that too. But I think that's the piece that we're working through right now, is to give some layering to those need statements. I don't think anybody disagreed the needs weren't a need. And certainly there was, as you witnessed, there was some more passion behind certain needs than others. But I don't think anybody said, I don't agree. I think we did see some diversity in how kind of that prioritization level of, does this happen first, second, or later? So we'll bring that information to you too. We tracked that through our questioning last week, so we have a sense of, was something split three ways, or was it really heavily weighted on let's do this right away? So you'll have that information to kind of weigh into how do we rank this or move forward with the recommendation. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and I guess being sure that, I think in the small groups, people can talk more than when it's the large group, and just being sure that all voices are heard, so that when the board gets the recommendations, we're confident that it was a process that was very inclusive. And it appears that way to me, but needs are different than solutions, and solutions sometimes we begin to move in different directions. So.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions for the process?
The one thing that I would say, board members, is, if you kind of look at the feedback that you've provided this committee along the process, you started with a charge statement that identified some big ideas. Either they were programmatic ideas or kind of conceptual ideas that you wanted them to consider. Now you've seen kind of their first assessment, the need statements, and been able to read through some of the things that they've identified. I guess the one piece that we would want to know sooner rather than later is if there's something that's missing that you think is still a big concept or idea, particularly represented from the charge statement. I don't think there are anything. I don't think anything is missing, but we want to make sure that if there's some big idea, I'll just use all-day kindergarten, for example. I know we've had conversations at the board table about all-day kindergarten, and if you think that programmatically that's something that you want to do going forward, then a question we should be asking is, how would that impact our facilities? Because clearly we would need more sections, more classrooms, more teachers to be able to accomplish that. And so it is something that we certainly would want to look at within the context of the facility master planning process. So I believe that's one that we have looked at so far. And, I want to make sure that if there's something else on your table or that you would like them to consider going forward, that we make sure that we capture those. So as you review that list of need statements, you don't necessarily need to have it tonight, but over the next several weeks, if you can make sure that either Dan or Carol Smith get that feedback from you to be able to take it back to the committee.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Carter, for coming tonight. Yep, appreciate it. All right, that concludes our discussion for the evening. Ms. Smith, were there any meeting comments? No? Okay. Then do I have a motion to adjourn to closed session by roll call vote for the purposes of litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the particular public body has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the public body finds that an action is probable or imminent, in which case the basis for the finding shall be recorded and entered into the minutes of the closed meeting. And number 3, the selection of a person to fill a public office as defined in the Open Meetings Act, including a vacancy in public office, when the public body is given power to appoint under law or ordinance, or the discipline, performance, or removal of the occupant of a public office, when the public body is given power to remove the occupant under law or ordinance.
So moved.
Mr. McNally?
Second.
Mrs. Barker? Move to roll, please.
Mrs. Barker?
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave?
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mr. Mannheim?
Yes. All right, we are adjourned at 7:58. We'll see everyone in our usual spot. All right, thank you.